Hey students, it's Mr. Mantle. Dr. Naro asked me to come up with a very scary story for Halloween, and there's only one story I could think of. Oh, it's the scariest thing that could ever happen at Monterey Hills. I hope you're ready for it. It's called...
Mrs. Kennedy and Mr. Zuma are missing! The students at Monterey Hills Elementary School were misbehaving again. Turkey sandwiches stuck to the lunch pavilion ceiling. Students arrived late all day instead of being on time. And they left masks and roadrunner feathers everywhere. They were the worst behaved students in the district of South Pasadena. "Now please sit down, students," said Mr. Zuma, the plant foreman, in a nice voice at lunchtime. But the students would not sit down. They got up from the lunch tables without asking. They left behind trash and water bottles and food wrappers. They left their backpacks at home so the front office would be littered with them. They were even rude to Dr. Naro, the principal. "Something will have to change," said Mrs. Kennedy, the office manager. The following day, Mrs. Kennedy and Mr. Zuma did not come to MHS.
"Yowzers!"
screamed the students.
"Now we can do whatever we want!"
They started to make more turkey sandwiches.
"From now on, let's just be despicable!"
they shouted.
"I don't think so!"
hissed a very unwelcoming voice. A lady in an ugly black dress stood before them. There was also a man with an ugly black mustache and ugly black t-shirt, too.
"I am your new office manager, Mrs. Sour."
"And I am your new plant foreman, Mr. Salty."
The students were confused.
Where is Mrs. Kennedy?
"And Mr. Zuma?" they asked.
"You don't need to worry about them. Off to class with you,"
said Mrs. Sour.
"And I better not see any trash or turkey sandwiches anywhere,"
said Mr. Salty. The students at MHS did as they were instructed. They knew Mrs. Sour and Mr. Salty were not fooling around. Pretty soon, Mrs. Sour and Mr. Salty had them working hard, scraping turkey sandwiches off the lunch pavilion, organizing the lost and found bin during recess time, and taking out all the garbage from lunch. At assembly, Mrs. Sour announced,
"We'll have no theater arts class this week."
"Keep your mouths closed and sit down,"
said Mr. Salty at lunchtime.
"And if you misbehave, you'll be sorry,"
they snapped. The students at MHS had never been more nervous. Time passed, and there was no sight of Mrs. Kennedy or Mr. Zuma. The students missed Mrs. Kennedy and Mr. Zuma.
Perhaps we should look for them,"
said one bright student. But when the students went to Mrs. Kennedy's house to look for her, no one was home. In fact, the only person they did see was Mrs. Sour walking down the street.
"If she catches us, she'll make us clean the office with a toothbrush."
They escaped just in the nick of time. Then they went to Mr. Zuma's house to look for him, but all they found were tags for new black t-shirts. The students of MHS became very sad. The situation looked bleak. It appeared that Mrs. Kennedy and Mr. Zuma would not be coming back. Mrs. Sour and Mr. Salty would be the office manager and plant foreman forever. At school the next morning, the students waited for the office and gates to open. They could hear keys jingling, approaching.
"Here comes the two scary ones,"
they whispered. "Good morning, children," said someone in a sweet voice.
"Come on in, students,"
said someone in a gentle voice. It was Mrs. Kennedy and Mr. Zuma. "Did you miss us?" asked Mrs. Kennedy and Mr. Zuma.
"Well, yeah, we really did,"
the students responded.
"Hey, where were you?"
inquired the students. "That's our little secret," said Mrs. Kennedy and Mr. Zuma. At lunchtime, Mr. Zuma noticed no students stood up or left behind trash. In the office, Mrs. Kennedy noticed the students came to school on time and with their backpacks on. There was no turkey sandwiches stuck anywhere, except the ones being eaten. "What brought about this lovely change?" said Mrs. Kennedy and Mr. Zuma.
Oh, that's our little secret,
said the students, and they all went to school together, happily ever after.